This week on Let's Talk About Mental Health, I'm talking about how to deal with times of uncertainty. So, let's talk. This is Let's Talk About Mental Health, a weekly podcast about mental health and well-being, hosted by Jeremy Godwin. Let's talk about mental health, because the more we talk about it, the easier it gets. Hello and welcome to episode 25 of Let's Talk About Mental Health, the weekly podcast about improving your mental health and well-being. I'm Jeremy Godwin. Thank you for joining me. This is my first episode back after taking the month of April off to deal with a whole bunch of stuff, which I'll talk about in a minute. But first, I just want to say a massive thank you to all of you for being so supportive of my decision to take some time off, especially at a time where we're all dealing with major challenges thanks to the health and economic and social effects of COVID-19. A very special thank you to every single one of you who has reached out to me with words of support over the last month. I have read every single one of them and I held them close to my heart while I was dealing with some difficult times. So please know how much I appreciate your kindness. I'm very happy to be back at it and I'm excited to talk to all of you again about the good, the bad, and the ugly of mental health. This week I'm talking about uncertainty. Specifically, how to manage your mental health during times of uncertainty, whether big or small. So, let's get talking. Now, before I jump into the episode properly, I'd like to just take a couple of minutes to give you a quick update on where I'm at after taking the month of April off. So, in March, I was very open with all of you that I was beginning to really struggle with my anxiety while the world seemed to be turning to shit overnight, as I'm sure that many of you were. And I was also dealing with the stress of things like my partner being exposed every day at work because the schools were still open 5 days a week here at that point. And all of that meant that I was finding it impossible, or almost impossible, to fight this ever-increasing sense of panic and dread that I was feeling at the time. And I talked about that already, I think, in the previous episodes. What I didn't talk about at the time was that at the same time that all of that was going on and things with COVID-19 were getting, going from bad to worse, our cat Pushka, who was 17 years old and who has been with us since she was 6 weeks old, she suddenly became quite ill. And to be really honest, with everything that was going on in the world and at home, Pushka being so sick, it was just too much to deal with all at once. Unfortunately, it turned out that her kidneys were failing and the situation deteriorated so quickly that there was no option other than to put her to sleep on the 14th of April. Now, even just saying those words breaks my heart. I know that not everyone gets it when it comes to people who are super close with their pets, but I loved that cat and I still do, like she was my own child. When I had my breakdown in 2011 and then I spent the next year and a half, 2 years, barely able to leave the couch, let alone the house, while I was dealing with crippling depression and anxiety that came after the breakdown, Pushka never left my side once. And when I was having really bad times, she would always know, she'd come and snuggle up against me and soothe my pain. And at the time, my partner was actually back and forth overseas for work for over 12 months, which was unavoidable. And it's no small statement to say that if it wasn't for Pushka, I would not be here today. When we had to decide to put her to sleep, my heart shattered into a million pieces, and it still hasn't fully repaired, and it probably never will, to be honest. I mean, I've learned to adapt without her, and I'm getting better every day, but the pain is all-consuming. Ironically, I had originally planned back in February, when I planned out the episodes for sort of the first few months of this year, that next week's episode 26, would be focusing on grief. So, yet again, it appears that I've come up with a topic that's sort of preempted and become highly relevant for myself around the time that it goes out. And that's something that keeps happening a lot with this show. I come up with a topic weeks or months in advance, and then by the time I go to produce the show, it's actually really relevant about something that's going on in my life. So I'm thinking that I probably need to do an episode on prosperity and abundance shortly so that I can see, what the universe decides to send my way. But anyway, look, that was all really highly personal about my cat, but I wanted to share that with all of you because my focus on Let's Talk About Mental Health is to talk about my own journey with the ups and downs of mental health, as well as sharing practical advice based on quality research. And so that has been a really big part of my life for the last month, dealing with all of that stuff. And it's probably no small statement to say that it will no doubt reflect in my work over the coming weeks, and that I'll be talking about topics that are somewhat relevant to some of those things that I've been going through. Anyway, enough about that. I hope that all of you are starting to find things a bit easier to manage now that we're beginning to slowly settle into this weird new normal that we're in. I don't know about you. I have good days and average days, plus the odd bad one. Obviously, I've had all the stuff going on with losing my cat. I think, thankfully for me, I'm finding that the bad days now are, aside from the grief component, the bad days related to what's happening in the world with COVID-19 are, for me, probably a bit more few and far between now compared to where they were when it all started. And I guess that's the thing, there's enormous stuff that goes on in the world, but your life keeps on going on. Things keep happening in your life. And so, things can be very heightened as a result of that. Having said all of that, I am mindful and extremely grateful that I have my health. And I know how very fortunate that we are to live in the country. I mean, look, I miss the city sometimes. I miss being able to just go out and grab something really easily. But I can only imagine how challenging it must be for everyone living in densely populated areas like cities with everything that's going on at the moment. Look, it's not all rainbows and sunshines and unicorns for me. I've struggled with the impact on my little fledgling business as a coach and a speaker, but it is what it is, and I have no control over it. So I'm choosing to focus on the positives. I have a roof over my head, I have food on the table, and with my partner working a full-time permanent job, it means that we're incredibly fortunate that we don't have to worry about making ends meet. So I know how fortunate I am. And let me say, for anyone listening who is struggling financially, my heart goes out to you, and I say what I always say. Focus on what is within your direct control and take things one day at a time. Things are tough for many people at the moment, but out of adversity comes opportunity. So as hard as it may be to find a way to focus on the positives at the moment, rather than dwelling on the negatives, find a way to do so, because like attracts like. Even in spite of everything that's been going on and the challenges that I've been dealing with, I see this time of uncertainty as a time of opportunity. And there's a quote by an anonymous author that goes, "When everything is uncertain, everything that is important becomes clear." And it's clear to me that things need to change because they just cannot go on the way that they were before. Now, we might not all have wanted things to change, but change is happening, regardless of whether we want it to happen or not. So we may as well take the bull by the horns and steer it in the right direction. Real change is not safe and it is not cozy. It is scary and it's confronting and it shakes you to your very core. And if that isn't an accurate description of what's happening to the entire world at the moment, then I don't know what is. My grandmother used to talk to me about making ends meet during World War II. She had 3 boys on her own, and she had to feed them on rations while still dealing with the uncertainty of her husband being away at war, and he eventually died in a prisoner of war camp. Over these past couple of months, I have reminded myself regularly of the amazing sacrifices that my nan made just so that her children could eat. And all while massive social upheaval was going on around her and dealing with the loss of her husband, and without the luxuries that we have today, like FaceTime or Netflix or the internet. The reality is, we will adapt. We'll adapt because we have to. Humanity's had to learn to adapt to stuff thousands of times or more throughout history, and we will continue to do so long after all of us are gone from this planet. Life goes on. We work out what our priorities are, we do what we have to, and we adapt. You will be okay. The reality for all of us is that we might need to modify our lives and our goals for a while, and that's okay. Maybe it will make us look at things from a different perspective. Maybe it will make you go down a path that you might never have explored if this didn't happen. When it comes to uncertainty, you have a choice. You can focus on the negatives, or you can focus on the positive. So even if it feels really difficult to get past all of the uncertainty and all of the challenges that are happening at the moment, it's actually in the best interests of your mental health and well-being to choose to focus on the positive. Now, with that said, so many people online at the moment, which I think is pretty much where we all live now, So many people seem to be focused on telling everyone how to do more so that we can pass this time quickly. But let me just say that you are under absolutely no obligation to do anything whatsoever with your time. You're probably never going to get a time like this in your life ever again, so you do with it what feels right to you. If the best that you can manage today is to get yourself out of bed, good on you. You don't need to go and make 16 loaves of banana bread. You don't need to completely scrub your house with bleach from top to toe 3 times a week. If you're able to have a shower today, even better. There's been such a focus on go, go, go in our society and driven by a lot of type A people, telling people that we have to do more, we have to achieve more. And we're seeing that at the moment with people, looking at how we can make the most of this time. And if that feels right to you, then great, and more power to you. But it's an individual choice, and it's not fair to make people feel shitty about themselves if they're struggling to find the energy to even drag themselves off the couch. These are unusual times. If there's one thing that's been reinforced to me over the past few weeks, it's that the physical effects of burnout, which I know I talked about in episode 18, the physical effects of burnout and that heightened level of emotion, it's all too real, and it can result in just feeling heavy and lethargic. So if that's happening to you at all, sometimes you just need to acknowledge that you feel a little bit shitty with everything that's going on and give yourself a bit of a mental break. My thing with that is that you need to take the time to feel what you need to feel, but do keep one eye on it. If it's happening every single day for days on end or weeks at a time, then you need to speak to someone about it if it just continues going on. The thing is that part of being a human being is about finding ways to adapt and to deal with stuff and to muddle our way through all of the crap that life throws our way. And so if you're struggling to do that for, 2 weeks or more, then the single best thing that you can do for yourself is to reach out to someone and start the process of healing. Now, with that in mind, let's talk about some specific things that you can do to make your way through uncertainty. This applies to any situation that you're in where you're feeling a huge amount of uncertainty. Obviously, it is extremely relevant at the moment with everything going on with COVID-19. So let's start with the first one, which is feel what you need to feel. So instead of trying to distract yourself from your emotions, sit with uncertainty. Feel it, understand it, and process it. You need to feel what you need to feel. And there's very few people who just think that it's business as usual anymore. So it's okay to feel uncertain. You might even feel sadness over the things that have happened to you and your loved ones, or grief over what's been lost. Feel those feelings and really process them so that you can understand it and it can show you what's really important to you. Sorrow can serve to shed a light on what really matters in your life. And if you find yourself feeling guilty about your feelings, shut that shit down. As long as you're not being self-absorbed or, one of those monsters trying to make a profit off the suffering of others, then it's okay to feel sad or whatever it is that you're feeling. Even if you haven't, lost your job or your home or your health, don't feel guilty for still feeling sad about a sense of loss for the things that have affected you directly. Just because there are people that are worse off than you, that doesn't mean that you're not allowed to feel some type of way about your own life. Feel what you need to feel. Just don't get bogged down in it. My next point is accept that what is what is. Now, no amount of shouting or worrying or protesting in the middle of the street is going to change things. What will be, will be. So focus on what you need to focus on in uncertain times, which is you and your loved ones. I mean, please don't go all Lord of the Flies and, go to the supermarket and start treating everybody else like the enemy, but just let other people be and focus on what you need to focus on. How other people handle uncertainty is up to them. Focus on what you do and focus on those that you love. My next piece of advice is one that I talk about a lot. Control what's in your direct control. In other words, your words, actions, and feelings. And let go of trying to control what you cannot control. So by remaining focused on what you can control and then letting go of the rest, you start to bring yourself far more peace of mind and clarity. Now, a word here about feelings. Your thoughts and feelings will often pop up out of nowhere, and it might even feel impossible to control them. However, you can choose to either give in to those feelings or to observe them mindfully and consider what it is that they're trying to teach you. So a lot of our feelings are driven by our needs that are being either met or unmet. And so rather than just running with those feelings when you get them, the more that you can focus on understanding what's driving them and then responding, rather than just reacting to a feeling, the more that you will then begin to find some control over them. It's not an exact science, and it does take time, and you'll never have complete control. Thoughts and feelings will pop up all over the place when you least expect it. But it certainly is possible to manage your feelings so that you control them instead of them controlling you. And this is something that I'll be talking about further over the next few episodes. My next point is to stick to a routine. I know that everything's up in the air at the moment and feels weird, but regardless of that, get up at the same time every single day, go to bed at the same time every single day, have lunch at the same time every single day. Why? Structure actually helps you to feel much more in control of your immediate circumstances, and it makes it feel less like, that crazy week between Christmas and New Year's when anything goes. You want to keep as much routine as possible. And even if that means you're just getting up at the same time so that you can sit in your pajamas and binge watch stuff on Amazon or Netflix or whatever, it's still a routine and it will give you consistency. Next, limit your exposure to stuff that adds to your uncertainty. I stopped watching the news years ago when I was in the worst of my depression and anxiety because it just made things worse. And I tell you now, this is not the time to sit and watch news report after news report that shows empty streets and full hospitals and all of that stuff. I mean, don't stick your head in the sand, know what's going on in the world, but don't overdo it. For me, I check the news twice a day, morning and late afternoon, on the news website for the ABC in Australia. And their reporting is about as impartial as you can get. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. So that way I know what's going on in the world. I have enough exposure to give me the information that I need, but I'm not bogged down in it. And, at the height of when everything was going crazy back in March, and I was already stressing out with everything happening with my cat, I found myself looking at the news 3, 4, 5 times a day. And I remember thinking to myself, what am I doing? I'm going to make things worse. And I did, because all of it was panic, 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 doom, doom, doom. Look, all the supermarkets are sold out. Anyway, like I said, don't stick your head in the sand, but just don't overdo it. And also be wary about social media. I was sharing funny memes for a while on my personal Instagram account to lighten the mood, but even those can be triggering if it's a rough day. So choose what you consume and do what feels right to you. Another piece of advice is to celebrate the little things. Here in my state, starting on the 1st of May, we're actually allowed to go out and visit friends, as long as, maximum 2 adults and, you have to go to someone's house and whatnot. And things like last week, our supermarkets reopened taking online ordering for click and collect, and I felt such joy. I've never been so excited. And it's such a first world problem, but for me, having anxiety, I found using click and collect, where you place your order online and they just go and pick it up. Unfortunately, they don't deliver to my small town, but being able to do that is fantastic because I don't need to go through the anxiety that can happen when you're shopping. So you can imagine how I felt when they suspended it, and then add to that everything that was going on. I mean, if you've been to a supermarket in the last 2 months, you know how completely insane the world has gone. During March, I'd get out of the supermarket and go sit in my car and have hyperventilate almost because it was just so stressful. So just the little things. Having click and collect reopen for my grocery order feels like a step towards humanity at this point. So yeah, it's the little things. And I guess broader than that, another point is to put things into context. We have never had to deal with something like this before. The closest comparison in living memory would probably have to be World War II and the Great Depression. I mean, realistically, since the 1950s onwards, we've had a pretty good run. I mean, mostly. Look, I know that, there's been disasters and tragedies, but the scale of what's happening now is unprecedented in most of our lifetimes. Feeling uncertain is probably a pretty realistic reaction to everything that's going on at the moment. So don't beat yourself up. Be gentle with yourself. Uncertainty by its very nature means ups and downs, things being all over the place. So be gentle with yourself if you find that you're having ups and downs and that you're all over the place. And I guess broader than that, my next point is to be kind to yourself and to others. You know how you've probably been up and down and all over the place with uncertainty and panic and fear and frustration and all of those other awful emotions over the last couple of months? Well, so has nearly every single other person in the world. even the horrible ones who, those ones who carry on like this pandemic is a personal affront to their right to be a moron. Very few people like change, and very few people like feeling completely out of control. So even if you don't agree with the behavior of other people, be kind. Be kind to other people. And be kind to yourself. And remember that old saying, 2 wrongs don't make a right. So in other words, don't add to the negativity that's out there in the world. Instead, contribute positivity. I always say to feel what you need to feel, but when it comes to anxiety that's triggered by uncertainty, you don't actually need to feel it in order to know why it's happening. Because the simple fact is it's happening because of fear. So once you know that, once you remind yourself of that, you can then choose to let fear control you, or you can make the choice to focus on hope, kindness, solidarity with your fellow human beings. And I find that that helps to gently lower my anxiety in those types of situations. So choose to be kind to others and to yourself. Now, my next point is take things one day at a time. And it's probably no surprise that I'm saying that because I usually say it at least somewhere in every episode, but it's more relevant now than ever before. Worrying about tomorrow is not going to help you. So focus on today and today only. Do what you need to do to get through today and take things one step at a time. As long as what you do does not harm yourself or others, then you do what you need to do. And another point more broadly than that is less yearning and more learning. So what I mean by that is rather than spending all of your time yearning for things to go back to the way that they were, learn from this because things actually cannot ever go back. Nothing will be the same again. And I know that's confronting, but it's actually a good thing. Things happen in life, and it's up to each of us to make sense of them and to integrate them into our way of being. We are being given an enormous opportunity right now. This is a chance to pause, reflect, and decide what type of world we want at the end of all of this. We need to learn from this, because things just cannot go back to the way that they were. We've all been shown that the only thing any one of us knows for certain is that our priorities aren't actually about all that other stuff. It's actually about the people that we care most deeply for. And that's as it should be. And so we need to consider how we're going to integrate this new learning, this deeper learning into our lives and our society going forward. Because when it comes to uncertainty, what it all boils down to is this. Uncertain times can serve to be a catalyst for positive change because uncertainty challenges us to find a way to rise above pain and sorrow and grief, and instead to build something completely new. Out of adversity comes opportunity. You have a unique opportunity to reshape your life in any way that you like so that you can focus on what really matters to you. And you have an amazing opportunity to contribute to shaping a better world by demanding that we learn the lessons that we need to learn from all of this by ensuring fairness for all. This might be a scary time, but I for one feel that we stand on the precipice of something big, something exciting, and I plan to do my part, however small, to contribute to a better tomorrow. So, to finish up this week, let me take a moment to share a quote about this week's topic that I'd like to encourage you to reflect on and consider what it means to you. This week's quote is by the Greek philosopher Epictetus, and it is, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." Let me repeat that. Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. Alright, so that's it for this week's episode about uncertainty. Thank you for listening. Next week I'll be talking about grief, how to manage your mental health and well-being during times of grief. I hope that you'll join me for that episode, which will be released on Monday morning in Australia and New Zealand, Sunday evening in the UK and Ireland, and Sunday afternoon in the US and Canada. You can find past episodes and additional content at the website, which is letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au. That's letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au. Just quickly before I wrap up, I've decided to stop the weekly Mental Health Talk newsletter for the time being, because I need to find a way to balance my time with a number of different projects that are going on. Plus, it was important for me to find a way that I could ease myself back into this podcast work without feeling swamped. Sometimes you just have to make the choice to slow your pace down and do what feels right to you, what you can manage. So I may bring the newsletter back in the future, but for now, I'll just be focusing on these weekly episodes. You can find Let's Talk About Mental Health on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest. I've just changed the username to better reflect the focus on mental health and to make it easier for new people to quickly identify what Let's Talk About Mental Health is about. So the new username for the podcast is @LTA Mental Health. That's @LTA Mental Health on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest. And that change is effective from May 2020. Thank you very much for joining me today. Look after yourself and make a conscious effort to share positivity and kindness out in the world, because you get back what you put out. Take care and talk to you next time.